What causes a sinkhole? A spiritual perspective 4. Spiritual research into the cause of sinkholes 4.1 How do subtle sorcerers cause sinkholes? Footnotes 1. The physical element has already been explained amply by geologists and has been described briefly above in section 4. 2. The psychological factor refers to the collective thoughts of people in the area a sinkhole appears. If there are many negative thoughts and thoughts of harming others among the people of that locality, negative vibrations are emitted into the environment. As a result, powerful negative energies pick up on these negative thoughts and hence have to work less to infuse negative vibrations in an area and thereby are able to create such sinkholes more easily. 3. Spiritual factors 70% of the reasons such sinkholes appear is because of the resolve of higher-level subtle sorcerers. Sorcerers capitalize on both the physical and psychological factors prevalent in a place to create such sinkholes, which become storehouses of negative energy to be used towards World War III and Armageddon. The very space where the hole appears needs to be at least 5% more negative than the average to enable the hole to appear. The proportion of physical and psychological versus spiritual will differ from sinkhole to sinkhole. In some cases it can be 10% physical, psychological and 90% spiritual. On an average though it is 30% and 70%. 4. The range of its capacity to affect the environment is also given on average. A sinkhole can exert an influence of 1,000 kilometers if it is very large. Subtle sorcerers through their supernatural powers, siddhis, use the 5 absolute cosmic principles, panchatattva, to achieve destruction on the earth plane. 4.2 What about sinkholes that look beautiful? Not all sinkholes look destructive like ones described above. Some sinkholes around the world are sought-after tourist attractions where visitors come to swim or dive. Examples of these sinkholes are 1. Bima sinkhole in Oman. 2. The Great Blue Hole near Ambergris Cay, Belize. Both these sinkholes however are example of sinkholes created with illusory negative energy of subtle sorcerers. Their picture-perfect well-rounded shapes camouflages the spiritual negativity within such sinkholes. People who swim in these water will be affected by the negative energy contained in it. You can test your sixth sense by conducting a subtle experiment on these sinkholes. 2 SSRF seekers visited a sinkhole that appears externally beautiful. Their experiences are below. While we were in Cancun, Mexico, we visited the Iquique sinkhole. When we arrived in the area of the sinkhole I felt my distress begin to increase as my thoughts became more extrovert. There was a set of stairs that led down to the sinkhole. As we descended, a feeling of heaviness surrounded my head and I found it difficult to think. My husband would ask me some questions and I would have difficulty in organizing my thoughts to respond to him. My chanting stopped and when I tried to restart my chanting it was very difficult. The pressure around my head was becoming increasingly hard to bear. On the exterior the sinkhole looked very nice, and many people were jumping in the water to swim in it. However, it was one of the places where I have felt the highest distress. I felt more distress at the sinkhole than I have while walking through a cemetery. Even while starting to write my experience of visiting a sinkhole I had difficulty clarifying my thoughts to express myself. This entire experience has shown me firsthand how negative and harmful sinkholes are on a subtle level. Mrs. Radha Malik, Vancouver, Canada. My wife and I were visiting Cancun, Mexico for a vacation and at one time we visited the Iquique sinkhole as a part of a tour package. The sinkhole is described as beautiful and it is a popular tourist destination. Since it has a pool at the bottom, many tourists choose to swim in it daily. When I first heard we would visit a sinkhole I thought that the distress would probably not be very bad. I felt that I must have been exposed to worse distress in other situations so things would be fine. However, as we were approaching the sinkhole, I noticed that the pressure in the environment was increasing. Later, I realized that my thoughts became more extroverted during this time though I was not initially aware of it. As we entered the sinkhole, I felt the pressure increase significantly and I felt that a subtle black covering had formed on my intellect that made it hard to think clearly and to chant. My wife was also visibly affected and she seemed to find it difficult to respond to questions I asked her. Though the sinkhole looked beautiful externally and many people were bathing in it, the entire area gave off a lot of negative vibrations. I was amazed that something that looked harmless in gross could be so dangerous in subtle and I could not imagine how distressing it would be to actually swim in the sinkhole. The experience has taught me how subtly harmful sinkholes can be. I was not expecting the sinkhole to be so distressing and the level of distress surprised me. On a positive note, this was a nice way to learn how valuable the spiritual knowledge that is available on SSRF about distressing phenomena such as sinkholes is. Mr. Oritro Malik, Houston, USA. 4.3 Sinkholes in remote areas. Another intriguing fact about these large holes or craters is their appearance in the wilderness or in very remote and sparsely populated areas. From the outside it appears that, in a way, it is good that these appear in remote areas to avoid causing damage to life and property. In reality, the opposite is true. When one investigates this through spiritual research, then the sinister motive of subtle sorcerers to cause much greater damage at a subtle level can be understood. Creating holes in remote areas has an added advantage: no one takes much notice of them. So, it becomes even easier for the negative energies to keep amassing negative energy in them until these centers become very strong. For instance, the subtle sorcerers have purposefully chosen a remote place, such as Siberia, to make the large holes or craters, because it is inaccessible to most people. Her Holiness Mrs. Yoya Valley, a saint from SSRF, commenting on spiritual phenomena of sinkholes, added, "Nowadays most people have forgotten God due to their ego and getting absorbed in the great illusion, Maya. Thus, the population on Earth is predominantly Rajatama. This has enabled the distressing energy transmitted by the negative energies from the region of hell to get accumulated under the ground. This distressing energy present below the ground is now being released into the atmosphere through the medium of these large gaping sinkholes. These sinkholes are one of the reasons why the proportion of the Rajatama on the Earth and in the atmosphere has increased and has become dangerously high." 5. What can we do to avoid such phenomena from occurring? One of the ways to counteract spiritual impurity is to adopt a spiritually purer lifestyle. As more people adopt a sattvic lifestyle, the Rajatama component will reduce due to an overall increase in the sattva component. This rise in purity reduces the chances of attacks by subtle sorcerers or negative energies. However, the only permanent cure is doing consistent spiritual practice as per the 6 basic principles of spiritual practice.